After being besieged by the massive army of wights, the forest child created by the Green Prophet was completely eradicated. The three-eyed raven, who could predict the Night King's movements, also disappeared, leaving only Bran, whose abilities of memory travel were insufficient, protected, although Bran was trying to break through his limitations during their escape.
Where's my sister?
He and Mira, who was dragging him along, were slow in their movements and were eventually caught up by the rampaging wights.
I'm so sorry.
Come with me, now!
Watching the Black Cloak men shatter the wights and come to a stop, they had no time to think and had to follow them on horseback. When they finally stopped to rest in safety, Bran recognized the black-cloaked man who had taken off his hood.
Uncle Benjen.
It was Benjen Stark, Bran's own uncle, who had died in the north while trying to save Snow. Looking at Bran's puzzled face, Benjen, pale and bloodless, explained that he had been stabbed in the abdomen by the wights with an ice spear when he went deep into the north, and he was saved by the forest child at the moment of his death. He had used dragon glass to pierce his own heart, the same method that dispersed the Night King's magic control over him.
The same way they made the walkers in the first place. You saw it yourself.
A shard of dragon glass plunged into your heart.
You must learn to control it.
Although he had his own consciousness, he was ultimately just a lifeless wight, faced with the powerful magic beneath the foundations of the wall. His current body was unable to pass through. That's why the Night King only advanced on humanity after resurrecting the giant dragon.
While it stands, the dead cannot pass. I cannot pass.
Where will you go?
The Great War is coming, and I still fight for the living. I'll do what I can, as long as I can.
Thank you, Uncle Benjen.
I wish you both good fortune.
After his uncle left, Bran looked at the weirwood beside him and decided to attempt to enter the memory space alone once again. He tried to erase his personal emotions in order to avoid being trapped. This time, Bran saw his father, the last person to see his Aunt Lyanna alive. At that time, everyone was rising up against the Targaryen dragon family, but the Mad King's son, Rhaegar Targaryen, took Aunt Lyanna away, and in the end, she bore the only son of the Targaryen family. In fear of Robert, who was destined to sit on the Iron Throne, killing every Targaryen, Lyanna entrusted the boy to her brother, Eddard Stark. Bran's father adopted him as a foster son and named him Snow.
Promise me, Ned. Promise me.
After experiencing countless lives' preparations, Bran finally returned to his birthplace, Winterfell, and he met his sister Sansa, who had been waiting for Snow's return. But as the truly three-eyed raven, devoid of emotions, he saw through his memories the actions Sansa had taken against their father.
Hello, Sansa.
Facing his elder sister whom he had not seen in 10 years, Bran felt as if she were laid bare before him, but no emotions stirred within him. As the Green Prophet who could erase emotions and travel through memory and time, Bran began his first conversation with his sister, which was about the issue of family inheritance. Sansa tentatively expressed that as the only male heir of the family, Bran was willing to give up the position of Duke of Winterfell. However, as the three-eyed raven with his current prophetic abilities, he claimed that he would not become a player in this game of power, and he carried the heavy responsibility of observing the Night King's movements. As Sansa persistently questioned him, Bran vividly depicted the scene where she was once married to Ramsay, as if he were present himself. This made Sansa, with many secrets in his heart, instantly panicked and made excuses to leave, because their father's confession and subsequent execution were entirely based on trusting Sansa. At night, when Littlefinger, who served as Sansa's advisor, visited, Bran, who could see the memories, remained calm, because the Valyrian steel dagger that Littlefinger brought as a gift was the very weapon that instigated conflicts throughout the Seven Kingdoms and attempted to kill Bran. As the second son of the Stark family who hadn't seen him for years, Littlefinger, with ulterior motives, wanted to test how much Bran knew about the events that had unfolded. He pretended to care about Bran's deceased mother and claimed that he would protect the Stark siblings in the future.
Anything I can do for you, Brandon. I need only ask.
Looking at the dagger that had caused the downfall of his family, Bran, who had already explored his memories, inquired about the dagger's owner. Clever as he was, Littlefinger claimed that it was not easy to identify the current owner of the dagger in this chaotic world, but he did not know that Bran had become the three-eyed raven, capable of seeing everything, and Bran was well aware that Littlefinger was the owner of the dagger.
To go through all of that and make your way home again only to find such chaos in the world. I can only imagine.
Chaos is a ladder.
Seeing Bran utter the same words he had spoken in the past, Littlefinger, taken aback, was interrupted by Mira, who had let him in. Before leaving, he couldn't resist testing Bran by addressing him as Lord Stark. For safety reasons, Bran refused the title, implying that he had not returned for power. Mira, who sensed that it was time to leave, came to bid farewell to Bran, and he calmly responded with just 2 words.
Thank you
Thank you.
for helping me.
My brother died for you. Hodor and Summer died for you. I almost died for you. Bran,
I'm not really. Not anymore.
you died in that cave.
Watching Mira depart with her wounded heart, the flesh and blood Bran could only suppress his emotions, because he had a greater responsibility on his shoulders, and he also sensed the arrival of another person. It was Arya Stark, his sister, who had gone through countless hardships and ultimately became a faceless assassin, as the first female student in the history of the House of Black and White to complete her training. She could cut off the faces of the dead and use them as disguises. Arya, who preferred the sword over the needle since childhood, was the second daughter of the Stark family. She witnessed the entire process of their father's betrayal and execution, and afterward, she disguised herself as a boy, hiding her identity by cutting her hair. She planned to go to the Wall to find her brother Snow, but unfortunately, she got separated from all her siblings. During their departure, the petite Arya became the target of bullying by others.
Drink. He's got a sword, this one.
What's a gutter rat like you doing with a sword?
You want it? I'll give it to you. I already killed one fat boy. I bet you never killed anyone. I bet you're a liar, but I'm not.
Gendry, the illegitimate son of the deceased King Robert, was also planning to go to the Wall to avoid the pursuit of the Lannister family. However, they were caught by the guards of House Lannister when the main group took a rest midway. Following the order to kill 100 rather than let Gendry escape, they massacred Arya's father's friend and those who resisted, witnessing the imminent death of the 3 prisoners locked in a cage. The kind-hearted Arya handed them an axe to facilitate their escape. After a fierce pursuit and search, everyone was captured and taken to the nearest castle for interrogation.
He was my son. My sister was 3 days ago.
Watching people being taken away every day for torture, knowing they would never return, Arya, suffering from hunger and cold, could only alleviate her fear by repeating her revenge list, because she had already secretly made up her mind to personally eliminate everyone who had harmed her family. Faced with the squad leader who selected one person each day for interrogation, Hot Pie, who observed carefully, came up with a plan to deal with the selection.
He told me he stares at him every day. That's why he doesn't get picked.
You.
Seeing the same frightened gaze from her fellow prisoners being taken away, Hot Pie was also terrified. Because the methods of interrogation were unforgettable, the guards would catch a rat and put it in a wooden barrel, then undo the prisoner's clothes and tie them around the chest, and finally use high heat to force the rat to dig into the chest.
I didn't see anyone help him. Take it off! Take it off!
Who helped him?
Gaines, the butcher, and his son.
That's better. You've been very helpful.
No, stop, please!
Watching the inevitable torture where death was certain whether one answered or not, Arya felt despair engulf her entire body. The next day at dawn, her friend Gendry was selected again. Seeing the barrel with the rat ready to be tied to his chest, Tywin, who was Cersei's father, returned from the battlefield. Seeing mostly young prisoners before him, he expressed his belief that resources should not be wasted during war. After some questioning, Tywin learned that Gendry was a blacksmith and ordered him to forge weapons for the army. Then, He saw through Arya's disguise as a boy and asked her to be his personal cupbearer. Seeing this arrangement by Tywin, who was the father of her father's enemy Cersei, Arya's heart rose to her throat once again, but Tywin, who was currently at war with Arya's brother Robb, had never seen the second daughter of the Stark family.
Girl, where are you from?
Maidenpool, my lord.
And who are the lords of Maidenpool? Remind me.
House Mooton, my lord.
You're a northerner, aren't you? And what do they say of Robb Stark in the north?
They call him the young wolf. They say he can turn into a wolf himself when he wants. They say he can't be killed.
Do you believe them?
No, my lord.
Although she had to deny her brother Robb in front of the hostile family, the Stark blood flowing through her veins had never changed. Arya, who thought her identity was perfectly concealed, was recognized by the imprisoned criminal she had once saved and who had been conscripted. However, Jaqen assured her that he would not mention it to anyone else and, as a token of gratitude for saving himself and 2 of his companions from a fire, promised to give Arya 3 lives. As long as she spoke the names, Jaqen would eliminate them.
3 lives I will give you. No more, no less. And we're done.
I can name anyone, and you'll kill him.
A man has said.
They call him the Tickler.
That is enough.
The next day, amid the screams of the crowd, Arya saw the executioner known as the Tickler fall from a building. This was Jaqen fulfilling his promise by eliminating the first name. Afterward, serving as a cupbearer, Arya gradually learned about the increasing plans of House Lannister. When she intended to secretly pass the information to her brother Robb, she was discovered by a commander in her hasty state. Although the commander couldn't read, he still intended to capture her and confront Tywin, although Arya managed to break free when he was off guard and hid herself. The key to Arya's survival at the moment was the plan book she had stolen from the commander.
Amory Lodge!
A girl has named a second name. A man will do what must be done.
Now!
A girl cannot tell a man when exactly he must do a thing. A man cannot make a thing happen before it's time.
But he's going to tell Tywin he's getting away. It has to be now!
In this era of weaponry, where killing someone silently within 5 minutes was crucial, only a long-range throwing dart could accomplish that. Facing such a threat with such methods in the city, Tywin ordered the hanging of all the captured prisoners who had been conscripted. He would rather kill 1,000 innocent people than let the assassin escape. He also ordered the burning of nearby villages and farms as a warning, and began to suspect Arya, who was serving as his cupbearer.
Eat.
I'll eat in the kitchen later.
It's bad manners to refuse a lord's offer. Sit. Eat.
Realizing she was in grave danger, Arya sought out Jaqen, who had promised her 3 lives. She asked him to help her and her friends escape from the castle. Although Jaqen initially claimed he had only 1 life left, Arya convinced him with her persuasive words and he agreed to her request. Under the cover of darkness, they nervously made their way past the gates that had already been dealt with. Jaqen managed to separate from the Lannister army, and he offered to teach Arya his skills if she wished to go with him.
I want to. But I can't.
However, driven by the seed of vengeance rooted deep within her, Arya chose to stay and find her family to join forces against Cersei. Seeing the determined girl before him, Jaqen left her with a coin and told her that if she ever needed help, she could find him across the sea.
If the day comes when you must find me again, just give that coin to any man from Braavos and say these words to him. Vala Morghulis.
Vala Morghulis.
Good.
Vala Morghulis.
After Jaqen left, the 3 companions, lost and with nowhere to go, they encountered the remnants of their foster father's man, who had died due to being framed by Cersei, the remaining followers of Robert and Ned. These men had formed the Brotherhood without banners, refusing to pledge loyalty to any house and instead acting as knights-errant, seeking justice across the Westeros continent. This was also why the Lannisters had been relentlessly pursuing them.
3 young ones on the run, carrying castle-forged swords. You escaped from Harrenhal?
Who are you?
Thoros of Myr. And the fella here with the bow is Anguy.
No, who do you fight for?
The Brotherhood without banners.
Thuras, a red priest, saw the swords in the hands of the 3 companions, which were clearly from the castle, and sensed their strong aversion during a conversation with Hot Pie. He knew that a soft approach wouldn't work and had to resort to a more forceful one. A true marksman could calculate the flight time of an arrow.
When I'm done talking, that arrow's falling down on your fat head.
Impressed by the display of such skill, the three astonished children had no choice but to comply. As the leader of this brotherhood, Thoros fulfilled his promise without malice. He allowed Arya and her friends to have a satisfying meal before continuing their journey, without asking too many questions about their future plans. Just as the three were about to leave, they passed by Craster, who had fled from Cersei's forces due to his weariness of the power struggle and happened to be caught by the Brotherhood. He recognized Arya, and as members of the Brotherhood who had once been loyal to the Stark name, they were obligated to protect Arya forcibly and took Craster back to their base to be dealt with by their leader. Hot Pie, who was devoted to the culinary arts, chose to stay behind and learn the craft as a squire in a tavern.
I made you something.
What is it?
It's wolf.
Goodbye, Hot Pie.
Goodbye, Harry.
Hey, Hot Pie! It's really good!
After bidding farewell, the Brotherhood safely returned to their secret base. As a free organization without a house during times of war, they had to be extremely cautious to ensure their safety. They also encountered Beric, a former great warrior and the current leader of the Brotherhood.
In a war, you're running from it.
Last I heard, you were King Joffrey's guard dog. But here you are 1,000 miles from home. Which of us is running?
Untie these ropes and we'll find out.
You murdered Micah, the butcher's boy, my friend.
Despite Craster's attempts to explain his change of heart and redemption from the Lannister family, he failed to convince everyone present, facing accusations of killing children, which went against his faith in the Lord of Light. Beric suggested a trial by combat. Craster, who had always been afraid of fire, reluctantly raised his shield to fight. With his knightly background and his physical strength, Craster quickly shattered Beric's shield, but as Beric's sword pressed against him with flames, a terrified Craster gradually lost his fighting spirit.
He will. But not today.